The fog did not stop them. That is what the Russian crews believed as they rolled forward near Pokrovsk. A long armored column moved with engines rumbling in the early morning darkness, headlights cutting thin beams through a gray wall of mist. Forward units radioed that visibility was collapsing to under 100 meters, but the order still came down the line: advance. According to frontline reports published by Euromaidan Press on November 16th, Russian units attempted to use the heavy fog as concealment, hoping to push through Ukrainian lines before drones could pick them up. But the drones were already there. They were not the loud, buzzing drones crews were used to hearing. These moved silently above the fog line as part of a reconnaissance grid Ukrainian forces have built up over 2 years of adapting to battlefield pressure. Operators watched the column from above, silhouettes glowing through thermal cameras, vehicles crawling down a narrow rural road with nowhere to turn, no room to maneuver, and no idea they had just driven into an invisible kill zone. Minutes later, the column vanished into explosions. According to Euromaidan Press and confirmed by independent reporting from U24 Media, drones corrected fire for artillery, boxed the column in, and destroyed at least a dozen vehicles, including armored buggies attempting to scout ahead. The fog that the Russians thought would protect them instead did the opposite. It masked the movement of the Ukrainian fire control teams and left the entire column blind. What happened that morning was over in minutes. The pattern behind it has been unfolding for months. This is not the story of one destroyed column. It is the story of why Russian armored columns keep dying. What makes this even more interesting is that when you look at how these kill zones are set up, how Ukrainian anti-armor units coordinate with drones, and how vehicles get trapped on narrow approach routes, you start seeing something that military analysts in Europe have been pointing out for years. This is exactly the kind of battlefield the Challenger 2 was designed for. Not because the British tank is some unstoppable superweapon, not because it is invincible or magical, but because its doctrine, sensors, armor philosophy, and crew workflow were built for the same type of engagements that Russian forces keep falling into. To understand why that is, we need to go deeper into the collapse of Russian mechanized tactics, the rise of Ukrainian precision killboxes, and the real-world capabilities of a tank that has shaped Western armored doctrine for 3 decades. Before we get there, we should set the stage with something clear. Russia is not losing armored vehicles because Ukraine has more tanks. It is losing them because Ukraine has a better grasp of the modern battlefield. Almost every major analyst, from the UK Ministry of Defence in its weekly intelligence summaries to reports by the BBC, Reuters, and independent researchers at the Institute for the Study of War, agrees that these columns are failing because Russian forces are still fighting in ways that the modern battlefield punishes almost instantly. If you want proof of that, you do not have to wait long. Pokrovsk was not the first, and it definitely was not the last. Just a few months earlier, on April 3rd near Andriivka, Ukrainian forces destroyed an entire armored column of approximately 12 Russian vehicles. United 24 Media published drone-corrected footage showing Russian vehicles moving in single file down a narrow rural road. The first vehicle was hit, then the last. That was enough. The rest were trapped in the kill zone with nowhere to turn. This is one of the oldest armored warfare rules in the book. Stop the lead vehicle, then stop the rear. It comes straight out of NATO Doctrine, and British, American, and German manuals all describe the same sequence. Once the column is pinned, every vehicle becomes a stationary target. This is the kind of ambush Western crews train for constantly, and it is exactly where tanks like the Challenger 2 become force multipliers. They do not wipe out entire columns alone, they anchor a kill zone. They force the enemy to stop, hesitate, reposition, or break formation. On a battlefield covered in drones, that hesitation is fatal. Now fast forward another few weeks, a new month, a different region, the same outcome. In early autumn, RBC Ukraine reported that the Azov Brigade stopped a massive Russian mechanized assault near Dobropilya. 22 armored vehicles were destroyed. The footage, released by the brigade itself, shows a mechanized push that looked more like something from the opening days of 2022. There was a lot of firepower, not a lot of coordination, and absolutely no protection against a drone network that can spot and correct artillery fire faster than Russian units can deploy smoke. Then there is the report from June 26th by Euromaidan Press, describing an even larger failure. A 23-vehicle Russian assault in Donetsk completely collapsed. According to battlefield assessments cited in that report, 18 armored vehicles were destroyed in under 3 hours. Most of them never even got a chance to engage. Different days, different locations, different units, the same tactical flaw. All of these columns were hit not because Ukrainian forces were overwhelming them with armor, but because Ukraine and its partners have built a network network of drones, reconnaissance units, artillery batteries, and anti-armor teams that can turn any road, any tree line, and any fog-covered valley into a death trap for massed vehicles. This is where the Challenger 2, a tank with fewer than 60 Ukrainian crews operating it, re-enters the conversation. The tank itself was not physically involved in these specific events. However, its doctrine and capabilities explain exactly why these kinds of ambushes are so devastating. The Challenger 2 has a reputation, and it is not just because of its armor or history. It is because of the way it fights. According to the UK Ministry of Defence and multiple British Armoured Corps veterans who have spoken publicly over the last decade, the Challenger 2's brain is not its gun or its armor. It is its optics. The TOG's 2 thermal sight is the cornerstone of its battlefield strategy. It was designed to let crews see through smoke, dust, darkness, and importantly in this context, fog. The same fog that trapped the Pokrovsk column. When British designers developed the Challenger 2 in the 1990s, they did not imagine drone swarms or FPV kamikaze strikes. They did think very hard about the need to see the enemy first, shoot first, and hit accurately, at distances where the enemy could not hit back. That is why, according to the UK Ministry of Defence and widely cited British defence sources, the Challenger 2 holds what is often described as the longest confirmed tank versus tank kill in history. A T-55 destroyed at roughly 4.7 kilometers during the Gulf War. The reason that matters is simple. If a tank can see far, aim fast, and fire accurately at long distances, it becomes the anchor point around which kill zones are built. Even in Ukraine, where drone warfare has changed everything, the principle still holds. The vehicle that sees first usually decides the fight. That is the piece Russian armored columns keep missing. Take Pokrovsk again. Ukrainian operators watched the column through thermal cameras above the fog. The Russians were completely blind. If even one Challenger 2 had been integrated into that defensive grid, its thermal system would have been able to see through the fog just as the drones did. It could have identified the lead vehicle, fired first, and forced the column to stop long enough for artillery and drones to box them in. That is what it means to anchor a kill zone in modern warfare. However, we should not drift into pure hypotheticals. Everything we are talking about here is grounded in how Ukraine has actually been fighting and how Western tanks behave in similar conditions. The Challenger 2 has been deployed in limited numbers, but it has already proven itself on the Ukrainian battlefield. According to reports confirmed by BBC defense correspondents in 2023, the only documented Challenger 2 loss in Ukraine was not caused by enemy tank fire. It resulted from a mine strike that immobilized the vehicle, followed by artillery hits while it was stuck. No tank on Earth performs well when it cannot move. That incident does not change the platform's strengths, and Ukrainian crews have consistently praised its optics, its stabilized firing platform, and its survivability in interviews published by European military outlets. The tank was built to survive ambushes. It was also built to break columns. Here is the problem Russia keeps running into. Every time its forces push forward in mass, they create the exact kind of environment that Ukrainian defenders, using NATO-inspired doctrine and Western-supplied systems, are prepared to punish. In Dobrapilya, the 22-vehicle assault failed for a very simple reason. Ukrainian observers saw them first, stopped the lead vehicle, and destroyed the rear one. The rest froze. If you talk to Western tank officers, whether British, American, or German, they all say the same thing. A column that stops is a column that dies. The Challenger 2 reinforces this doctrine. Its hunter-killer system allows the commander to spot targets independently while the gunner is engaging something else. Western crews train to identify, prioritize, and eliminate the most important targets first. The lead vehicle, the rear vehicle, the vehicle with the biggest gun, the one coordinating the rest, vehicles carrying infantry, then everything else. That is how you destroy a column efficiently. Russian crews, according to both Ukrainian and Western defense reporting, often lack this flexibility because their doctrine is built around momentum. Soviet-era tactics emphasize pushing forward, overwhelming the enemy with numbers, maintaining pressure, and creating a breakthrough. That can work when the enemy does not have precise intelligence, high-accuracy artillery, and drones watching every tree line. Ukraine has all three. To understand why these columns keep falling apart, you also have to understand the terrain. Ukraine's geography creates natural kill zones. Tree lines that run parallel to roads act as perfect cover for anti-tank teams. Narrow rural roads channel vehicles into predictable lines. Fog, mist, and smoke make it even harder for Russian units to see. Drones do not care about any of that. They fly above it, look down, and turn the battlefield into a glowing map of heat signatures and movement. They see long before anyone on the ground does. This brings us back to the Challenger 2 and its role in the broader context of armored warfare. Even though we are not talking about the Challenger doing the shooting in these particular ambushes, its doctrine explains the pattern behind them. Western tanks are not built to charge recklessly across open fields. They are built to dominate from positions of advantage, to break advances, to stop columns, and to anchor defenses. When they work with drones, artillery, and reconnaissance teams, they become even more effective. Ukrainian forces have taken the same principles and applied them across an entire front line. That is how they have been able to destroy columns in Pokrovsk, Andriivka, Dobropilya, and Donetsk. They are not overpowering Russia with sheer armor. They are outseeing them, outthinking them, and controlling the battlefield with a level of precision that Russia has not been able to match. This brings us deeper into the heart of the story. Why does Russia keep trying this? Why do they keep pushing forward with massed assaults, knowing there are drones overhead and defenders waiting with artillery, FPV drones, and anti-tank teams? To answer that, we have to go back to Russian doctrine, the state of its armored fleet, and the pressure its commanders face along the entire front. Russian commanders keep sending these columns forward because their doctrine depends on momentum. They want breakthroughs, not standoffs. Breakthroughs only happen when armored units can push rapidly through weak points. The problem is that every Russian unit on the ground is facing a Ukrainian defensive grid designed to make sure there are no weak points. A tree line with a drone operator becomes a fortified position. A small unit with thermal scopes becomes an armed observation post. A single tank, Western or otherwise, becomes the keystone of an entire defensive zone. According to assessments from the UK Ministry of Defense, Russian forces are under enormous pressure to maintain offensive tempo even when conditions do not favor them. When tempo becomes the priority, caution disappears. That is how columns end up moving forward in heavy fog. That is how vehicles end up on narrow roads without proper reconnaissance. That is how 12 vehicles near Andriivka become trapped. That is how 22 vehicles near Dobropilya never reach the battle line. That is how 18 vehicles in Donetsk are destroyed in under 3 hours. None of these failures happen because Russia stopped manufacturing armored vehicles. They happen because Russia keeps using them in ways the modern battlefield punishes immediately. This is where the Challenger 2's doctrinal relevance becomes even clearer. The British Army does not only train crews on how to shoot, it trains them on how to break momentum. British armored officers often describe the tank's role as the scalpel at the front of the hammer. It is not the hammer itself, it is the tactical tool that shapes the fight, opens the enemy formation, or holds back a breakthrough. The Challenger 2 is not meant to charge at full speed into a wall of fire. It is meant to position itself so that its optics and gun create a zone where the enemy cannot pass. That is why it is such a useful lens for explaining these Ukrainian victories. Russian columns keep dying because they enter kill zones with no ability to see or respond. The Challenger 2 is the opposite kind of machine. It is built on the assumption that your greatest defense is what you see first. According to former British tank commanders interviewed by the BBC and by outlets such as The Times, Challenger crews are taught to fight from prepared positions, to use terrain to their advantage, to let the enemy come to them, and to strike precisely. That is the mentality Ukraine has adopted across the front, regardless of which vehicles it is using. You see that in every engagement we have discussed. Pokrovsk was not an accident. It was a controlled response. Andriivka was not just luck. It reflected doctrine. Dobropilya was not pure improvisation. It was a rehearsed method. Donetsk was not simply a collapse of Russian morale. It was the result of coordinated killbox tactics. These events follow a pattern because Ukraine has turned the modern battlefield into a network of information. Russian forces are still trying to fight in lines. Ukraine is fighting in layers. There are layers of drones, layers of observers, layers of artillery, layers of traps, choke points, mines, anti-armor teams, and pre-selected coordinates. If a column appears, someone sees it. If someone sees it, someone fires on it. If someone fires on it, someone corrects the fire. Within minutes, that column becomes a line of burning metal. Western tanks like the Challenger 2 thrive in this environment because they were built for it long before drones existed. UK defense publications often describe the Challenger 2 as a fortress with a rifle. That metaphor works because the fire control system and thermal sights give it the ability to win fights before the enemy ever sees it. That is not marketing language. It is the product of decades of doctrine. British tank crews were trained to engage in low visibility environments, to fire accurately while stationary or on the move, move and to protect infantry by dominating open ground. The relevance of that doctrine becomes even more obvious when you look at Ukraine's geography. The country is a patchwork of tree lines, villages, riverbeds, open fields, and rural roads. Battlefield analysts, from Reuters correspondents embedded with Ukrainian brigades to defense researchers at the Institute for the Study of War, highlight the same thing. The vast majority of Russian vehicle losses occur in channels, roads, forest lanes, mud corridors, river approaches. Ukraine does not need to outperform Russia everywhere. It only needs to dominate these channels. It does that with drones, with artillery, with small anti-armor teams, and with the relatively small number of Western tanks it has. Now we should touch directly on the Challenger 2's real performance in Ukraine, because this is important for grounding the narrative in fact. The BBC, Sky News, and several European defense outlets have confirmed that the tank has been used in frontline operations. It has mostly been deployed in defensive roles and in areas where it can exploit long sight lines and stable firing positions. Ukrainian crews interviewed by British journalists repeatedly emphasized that the tank's optics are its greatest asset. They also highlight how survivable the vehicle is. When the single Challenger 2 was destroyed near Robotyne in 2023, investigators from multiple outlets confirmed the cause: an anti-tank mine that immobilized it, followed by sustained artillery fire while it was stuck. It was not a frontal penetration. It was not a tank versus tank defeat. It was a mobility kill. This matters because it shows the limits of any tank in a modern battlefield. No platform is invulnerable. It also shows why the Challenger's doctrine of seeing first, shooting first, and anchoring the fight remains relevant. A mobile Challenger 2 is one of the most difficult tanks in the world to destroy, according to public UK Ministry of Defense training materials and after-action assessments from British deployments in Iraq. That principle, that mobility and information beat mass, is at the core of every Ukrainian ambush. This is why the Challenger 2 is such a useful framework for understanding these events. The tank was designed for the same kind of terrain and visibility problems that Russia is struggling with now. Its sights let it see through fog and smoke. Its optics let it identify heat signatures at range. Its armor lets it survive long enough to reposition. Its doctrine teaches crews how to break momentum, stop advances, and force the enemy into kill zones. Ukrainian forces are applying these principles even when they are using other platforms. This is not a story about a British tank arriving to save the day. It is not a fan story about miracle weapons. It is the opposite. It is a study of how doctrine wins battles, how thinking wins battles, and how information wins battles. Russia has tanks, artillery, and numbers. Ukraine is fighting with precision, leverage, and control of the battlefield grid. That turns every armored column into a parade that can be ambushed. As long as Russia continues to push columns into Ukraine's layered defense network, these outcomes will repeat. Not because Ukraine is lucky, not because Russia is inherently weak. Doctrine does not care about nationalism. It does not care about propaganda. It does not care about brute force. Doctrine rewards whoever adapts. So when you see columns burning on narrow roads, when you see vehicles trapped in fog, when you see ambushes unfold in seconds, you are not just watching explosions on a screen. You are watching the collapse of outdated doctrine. You are watching the rise of a new battlefield reality. You are watching why in modern warfare, a single well-positioned tank or a single skilled drone team can stop an entire armored assault. Columns do not survive the modern battlefield.